Lock the door. Put the phone down. What I am about to tell you is not a highlight reel from a martial arts magazine. This is a file. 6 names. 6 bodies that were turned into weapons. 5 of them left a trail of broken men, broken bulls, and broken records. One of them, the fastest human being who ever lived, was killed by the only thing he could not outrun: his own body. I am Blackwell, and this is not part 1. If you missed the first 6, go back. If you saw it, you already know the rule. Nobody on this list was safe to be around. Not their students, not their opponents, not their wives. Some of them I tracked down personally. One of them looked me in the eye in a garage in California in 2015 and said a sentence I have never forgotten. We will get to him. But first, we start in a mountain cabin in Japan. Winter of 1947. A man alone with a rock and a tree. He is shaving his own eyebrows off because he swore he would not come back down until he had become something that was no longer human. Masutatsu Oyama. Remember the name. Some of you know him as Mas Oyama. Some of you have never heard of him. That is fine. The bulls he killed with his bare hands did not know his name either. They only knew what his fist felt like the last half second of their lives. He was not born Japanese. That is the first lie they tell you about him. He was born in 1923 in a Korean village under Japanese occupation, and his real name was Choi Yong-ui. His family was peasant, dirt floor, no shoes, the kind of poverty where a single egg was shared between 4 children. When he was 9 years old, a Korean farmhand on his sister's estate showed him a martial art called the 18 Hands. By 12, he was practicing in the rain because he believed rain made pain feel normal, and he wanted pain to feel normal. At 15, he moved to Japan, alone, a Korean boy in Tokyo in 1938. Think about what that means. The Japanese were in the middle of an empire, and they despised Koreans. He was beaten in the streets, he was spat on, he trained in secret, in basements, in the few dojos that would let a Korean through the door. He studied judo. He studied karate under Gichin Funakoshi, the father of Shotokan. He was not the best student, he was the angriest student. In 1946, the war had just ended, Japan was in ruins. And Oyama did something that no sane man does. He climbed Mount Minobu with a single friend and a stack of books and decided he would not come down until he was a monster. His friend lasted 6 months. Oyama stayed 18. He trained 12 hours a day. He ran up cliffs with weights tied to his legs. He punched a pine tree 500 times every morning until the bark was stripped off and the tree was dead. And when the tree was dead, he found another tree. His knuckles flattened into what looked like pieces of sanded concrete. He broke river stones by dropping them onto his palm. He meditated under freezing waterfalls in January until his hair froze. He shaved one eyebrow off so he could not sneak back to civilization and be seen in public. He had to wait for the eyebrow to grow back before he could come down. It was a rope he tied around his own throat. When he came off that mountain, he was no longer a man. He was a weapon. And here is where the bulls come in. Listen carefully. In 1950, to prove what his hands had become, Oyama walked into a slaughterhouse in Tateyama, Japan, and fought a tethered bull with his bare hands. He knocked off the horn with the edge of his palm in one downward strike. The bull went into shock. Oyama killed it with a punch to the skull. One punch. He did this 47 more times in his career, 52 bulls total. 3 of them dropped with a single strike to the forehead, dead before they hit the ground. There is film of this. Black and white, grainy, shaky hands behind the camera. You can see the animal's legs fold. You can see Oyama not even breathing hard. He walks away. He does not celebrate. One of those bullfights almost killed him. The bull hooked him in the leg and tore a hole through his thigh. Oyama finished the fight with the horn still in him, then dragged himself to a doctor who told him he would never walk right again. He walked fine. He walked back to the mountain. He toured America in the 1950s. He went to Chicago. He went to Texas. He took on professional wrestlers, boxers, strongmen. He broke bricks stacked to the ceiling. He broke beer bottles by slapping the tops off cleanly, one after another, with a karate chop. The Americans called him the God Hand. The Japanese called him Sosai, which means director or founder. In 1953, he opened his first dojo. In 1964, he founded Kyokushin Karate, the hardest, the most brutal, the most feared style of karate the world has ever seen. Kyokushin men do not wear pads. They punch each other in the body with full contact until one of them cannot stand up. The famous 100-man kumite is an Oyama creation. You look like men who have come back from a war. Blackwell sat with a Kyokushin elder in Tokyo in 2018. The man was 79. His hands were the size of oven mitts and the color of leather. I asked him what Oyama's fist felt like. He said, and I am giving you the exact words the interpreter gave me, __, quote, _0, __. Now here is where the story turns. Oyama spent his whole life breaking things. Bulls, boards, men, records. But in his 50s, he started coughing. He ignored it. He was Mas Oyama. Mas Oyama did not get sick. He was the man who killed bulls. Cancer does not respect resumes. By 1994, he was in a Tokyo hospital bed, 70 years old, barely able to lift his hand. His students came to see him. They were crying. He told them to stop crying because it was bad posture. He died of lung cancer on April 26, 1994. They say he had been smoking Japanese cigarettes his entire adult life. The hands that killed 52 bulls could not kill what was growing in his own chest. Here is the irony that Blackwell can never stop thinking about. The man who made his body unbreakable died because of the one thing he had been poisoning it with, quietly, every day, between training sessions. The God Hand was killed by a small paper tube. Do not cry for him. He would consider it disrespectful. Move on. Because the next man on this list makes Oyama look emotional. Dali Fedor Emelianenko, the last emperor. A name that does not fit a human being. A name that fits a ghost who has wandered into a cage and forgotten to leave. You need to understand something about Fedor before I tell you what he did. He does not look like a fighter. If you passed him on a street in Russia, you would think he was a plumber, or a bus driver, or a school janitor. He is short for a heavyweight. He is soft around the middle. His face is round and pale and expressionless. He has dead blue eyes. He wears cheap sweaters. He has never once in his career celebrated a victory with his arms raised. He walks out of the cage the same way he walked in, like he is walking out of a factory shift. And for 10 years, from 2000 to 2010, no human being on planet Earth could defeat him. He was born in 1976 in Rubizhne, a Soviet industrial town in what is now Ukraine. His family moved to Stary Oskol, Russia, when he was a child. His father was a welder. His mother was a teacher. They lived in a concrete apartment block. They had nothing. Fedor started wrestling at 11 because the local gym had heat and his apartment did not. That is the reason. It was cold and he wanted to be warm. Think about that the next time you tell yourself you need a fancy gym to train. He joined the Soviet, then Russian, Sambo program. Sambo is a Russian mix of judo and wrestling and leg locks designed by the Soviet army. It is the art of breaking people quietly. Fedor became national champion. He did his mandatory military service as a firefighter. He was drafted into the army. He was, on paper, a nobody, a provincial kid from a nowhere town with a flat face and soft voice. In 1997, he started professional fighting. By 2000, he was in Pride Fighting Championships in Japan, which at the time was the hardest organization on Earth. The UFC was a sideshow then. Pride was the big leagues. In Pride, you fought the baddest men in the world on Japanese television under stadium lights for Japanese money. And Fedor came in and he started dismantling everybody. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, the Brazilian jiu-jitsu master, the man who had tapped out every heavyweight on the planet. Fedor beat him 3 times. He broke Nogueira's guard, which nobody had ever done. Nogueira later said, "Fighting Fedor is like fighting a ghost. You cannot feel him. You cannot see him coming." Mirko Krokop, the Croatian kickboxer whose left high kick had decapitated champions. Krokop was the most feared striker in the world. People literally said, "Right leg, hospital. Left leg, cemetery." Fedor beat him in one of the greatest heavyweight fights ever filmed. He took a Krokop knee to the face that would have killed a horse and kept walking forward with that same blank expression. Mark Coleman. Kevin Randleman, the American wrestling monster who suplexed him on his head and nearly snapped his neck. Fedor got up. Fedor armbarred him a minute later. Semi Schilt, 7 feet tall. Keith Haring, Gary Goodridge, Ricardo Arona. The list is a graveyard. His signature was absolute indifference. He would get punched in the face, hard, by the biggest men on the planet, and his expression would not change. His heart rate would not change. In the middle of a brawl with a man trying to kill him, he looked like he was thinking about what he was going to have for dinner. Other fighters started to break just looking at him. They would land a huge shot, and Fedor would smile a little, that tiny Russian Orthodox smile. And they would realize in that moment that they were going to lose, and they would lose. At his peak, experts called him the greatest heavyweight of all time. Greater than Ali, greater than Tyson. For 10 years, he was not just undefeated, he was untouched. And then came the night. June 26, 2010, Strikeforce event in San Jose, California. Fabricio Verdum, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, comes out. Verdum is a big man, but he is not scary. He has been knocked out before. Nobody expects anything from him. Fedor comes out in his cheap black trunks, cold eyes, cold walk. They touch gloves. Fedor charges in, because Fedor always charges in, and he clips Verdum with a right hand and knocks him to the canvas. Verdum falls on his back. Every other fighter in the world would have stood up and backed away, because Verdum is a legendary grappler on his back. Fedor does not back away. Fedor dives on top of him. Verdum wraps his legs around Fedor's head like he has been waiting his whole career for exactly this mistake. Triangle choke. Armbar. 1 minute and 9 seconds into the fight, the Emperor taps out. The arena went silent. People in Russia were watching at 4 in the morning. People were crying in the streets of Stary Oskol. It was not just a loss, it was the end of a myth. The Emperor had bled. The Emperor had tapped. The thing that made Fedor Fedor was not his power or his speed. It was the feeling you had that he could not be beaten. Once that feeling was gone, it never came back. He kept fighting. He lost again. He lost 3 times in a row. He retired. He came back. He retired again. He is alive today, in his late 40s, living quietly in Stary Oskol, going to church, raising his daughters. But the man who ruled the heavyweight division for a decade is gone. What is left is a quiet Russian who prays in the morning and goes to bed early. Here's the part nobody talks about. Blackwell dug through old Russian interviews, the ones that never got translated into English. In 2011, a year after the Verdum loss, a Russian journalist asked Fedor if he was angry about the defeat. Fedor sat there for a long time. He looked at his hands, and he said, quote, 3. Think about what that means. The man who terrified every heavyweight on the planet had been awake every night, waiting for the moment his own myth would crack. When it finally cracked, he was grateful. The last emperor wanted to go home. The irony is not that he lost. The irony is that he had been carrying the weight of invincibility like a bag of rocks, and the moment Verdum's legs closed around his neck, the rocks fell off. Fedor walked out of the cage that night and slept, just slept. Like a welder's son from Stary Oskol. Now, pour yourself a drink, because the next man on this list is the reason every Hollywood stuntman in the 1970s and 80s whispered in the hallways. The man who choked an action movie star unconscious in front of a film crew and then went to lunch like nothing had happened. The man Blackwell sat with in a cluttered garage in Sherman Oaks, California in 2015 and who looked me in the eye and said a sentence that I will tell you at the end of his portrait. Not before. You earn that sentence. Gene LeBell. Judo Gene, the toughest man alive, the man Bruce Lee personally asked to teach him how to grapple. He was born in 1932 in Los Angeles. His mother, Eileen Eaton, was the most powerful woman in American boxing. She ran the Olympic Auditorium, the main boxing venue on the West Coast. Gene grew up in the locker rooms with Sugar Ray Robinson, with Rocky Marciano, with every major fighter of the 1940s and 50s. He was a fat little kid who sat in the corner and watched giants kill each other for money. And he decided young that he was going to become something the giants could not handle. He started judo at 7. By 21, he was the United States national heavyweight overall judo champion. Twice. He did not just win, he humiliated men 50 pounds heavier than him. He threw them so hard that one opponent, according to contemporary reports, landed on his own head and was carried off the mat. In 1963, the most important fight of his life took place, and most of you have never heard of it. A boxer named Jim Beck had written a magazine article claiming that any good boxer could beat any good grappler. Gene LeBell volunteered to settle the argument. They held the fight in Salt Lake City on December 2, 1963. Gene came out in a white gi. The boxer, Milo Savage, came out in gloves. It was mixed rules. It was brutal. It was, arguably, the first mixed martial arts fight in American history. Gene took him down. Savage could not do anything on the ground. In the 4th round, Gene wrapped his arm around Savage's neck and choked him unconscious. The boxer went limp. Gene held the choke 2 extra seconds just to make a point. The crowd, full of boxing fans, threw garbage, threw chairs, threw bottles. They were screaming at Gene like he had committed a crime. Gene walked out with an escort. He did not get his promised prize money until weeks later. And for 60 years afterward, that fight was nearly erased from the record. The boxing establishment did not want the story told. That was only the beginning. Gene LeBell became the most feared stuntman in Hollywood. He choreographed fight scenes. He doubled for Lee Marvin. He doubled for Clark Gable. He trained actors. He trained fighters. Bruce Lee, the man we will get to at the very end of this video, personally walked into Gene's gym and asked Gene to teach him ground fighting because Bruce had been told that Gene was the only man in Los Angeles who could actually hurt him on the floor. Gene taught Bruce. Bruce taught Gene a few things. They became close friends. And then came the Steven Seagal incident. It is legendary. It is one of those stories that every fighter in Los Angeles knows and almost nobody officially admits. On the set of a movie in the early 1990s, Steven Seagal was being, by every account, insufferable. He was telling the crew that no grappler could touch him. He was telling everyone that he was untouchable. He said it loud. He said it often. Gene was the stunt coordinator. Gene was in his 60s. Gene had white hair and a belly. Gene asked Seagal, politely, if he would like to test that claim. What happened next has been told and retold in different versions. Here is the one Gene told Blackwell in his garage in 2015, with no cameras on, over a cup of very bad coffee. Gene said, quote _4__. Gene laughed when he told me this. He was 83 years old. His hands were still the size of shovels. He said, and this is the sentence I promised you. He looked right at me and said, quote _5__. Gene LeBell died on August 9th, 2022. He was 90 years old. He passed peacefully in his sleep in Sherman Oaks, California. The man who choked champions, who threw Olympic wrestlers, who made Steven Seagal soil himself on a studio lot, who taught Ronda Rousey everything she knew, the man feared by every serious martial artist in America for half a century, died quietly at home, in a bed, under a blanket. That is the irony. The hardest men on this list almost always go out the softest way. The universe has a sense of humor. Gene would have appreciated it. Now we move to Brazil. Now we move to a man who did not lose a single fight in 400 attempts. and who still could not protect the one thing that mattered: Rickson Gracie. If you have ever trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the name Rickson is whispered in the way religious people whisper the name of a saint. He is a Gracie. He is the son of Helio Gracie, who we will get to next. He was born in 1958 in Rio de Janeiro, and he was raised, from the moment he could crawl, on jiu-jitsu mats. His toys were training dummies. His playground was a dojo. His bedtime stories were about his uncles choking out Japanese judoka in the 1930s. But Rickson was different, even among the Gracies. His own family considered him the most dangerous. His own father, Helio, who was not a man who handed out praise, said that Rickson was the best of them all. The best Gracie. Let that settle. In a family of world-destroying grapplers, the patriarch said Rickson was the one. By 16, he was fighting adult black belts. By 18, he was fighting full-contact vale tudo matches in Brazil. Vale tudo, which means quote 6, was the predecessor to MMA. No weight classes, no rounds, minimal rules. You fought until somebody could not continue. They were held in gyms, in circuses, on beaches, in underground clubs where the audience was full of gamblers and gangsters. Rickson went through them, all of them. The most famous of his fights was against a 230-pound Brazilian street fighter known as Rei Zulu, a man who had defeated everyone the country had thrown at him. He had beaten a Gracie before. He was the reigning monster of Brazilian fighting. Rickson was 170 pounds soaking wet. They fought in 1980. Rickson took him down and dismantled him. Zulu could not believe it. Zulu demanded a rematch. In 1983, they met again. Rickson dismantled him again. After that, Zulu stopped fighting. Rickson moved to California in the late 1980s. He opened a school. He fought in Japan in the Pride era, in special Vale Tudo events. He beat Nobuhiko Takada. He beat Masakatsu Funaki. He beat everyone the Japanese could find. His record, by his own count, is more than 400 fights, 0 losses. Some of those fights were underground, not officially recorded, so we cannot verify the exact number. But you can verify the men he beat. You can verify their names. You can ask them what it felt like. Every man who fought Rickson said the same thing. They said he did not grapple like a human being. He did not grip with force. He did not use strength. He moved like water moving into a crack in a wall. You did not feel him until you were already submitted. By the time you realized what was happening, your arm was broken, or you were unconscious, or you were tapping. He had what Brazilians call underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 7, underscore, underscore. Blackwell watched Rickson train in 2019 in Los Angeles. He was 61 years old then. He was rolling with a 25-year-old black belt, a competitor, a guy with muscles. Rickson was wearing a faded gi that looked like it was 20 years old. He was not moving fast. He was barely moving. And every 30 seconds, the black belt would tap. Then the black belt would reset. Then the black belt would tap again. This went on for 20 minutes. The young man got up at the end, dripping sweat. Rickson was not even breathing hard. He smiled that small, Gracie smile and said, quote, 8, quote. The young man later told Blackwell, quote, 9, quote, "Now, listen carefully, because here comes the part of Rickson's story that is not about fighting. This is the part that breaks you." His son's name was Rickson, born in 1981, named after his father, a beautiful boy, tall, fast, strong. Rickson had raised him to be the next generation. He had taught Rickson everything he knew. By the time Rickson was 18, people who had trained with him were saying that he was going to surpass his father. He was going to be the greatest Gracie of all time. In December of 2000, Rickson went to New York City to visit friends. He was 19 years old. He was full of life. He had his whole career ahead of him. On December 28, 2000, he was found dead in his friend's apartment in Manhattan. Drug overdose, heroin, the official ruling. Rickson, the man who had never been defeated, the man who had broken 400 fighters, got the phone call in California. He flew to New York. He identified his son's body in a morgue. And then he flew home. He did not speak publicly for a long time, years. When he finally spoke in a documentary, all he said was, quote, "The man who could not be beaten was beaten, not by a fighter, not by an army, by a needle and a bad night in an apartment he was not even in." He still teaches today. He is 66 years old. He lives in Los Angeles. He is, by every measure, the greatest practitioner of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu who has ever lived. And the photograph of his dead son is in his wallet. The man who never lost the one fight that mattered. The irony, the cruelty of it, is that Rickson had inherited everything his father had. Every technique, every skill, every birthright. And none of it could protect him from himself. Now, his father, Gene Gracie, the architect of everything. If Rickson was the masterpiece, Helio was the sculptor who carved the marble. And Helio, and this is what most people do not understand, was not even supposed to be a fighter. He was a sickly child, a frail child, a child whose own mother was told by doctors that he would not live to adulthood. He was born in 1913 in Belém, a swampy city in northern Brazil. His family was poor. He had 5 brothers. His oldest brother, Carlos Gracie, had been taught a form of Japanese jiu-jitsu by a traveling master named Mitsuyo Maeda. Carlos opened a school in Rio de Janeiro. Helio was not allowed to train. The family doctor had forbidden it. He had fainting spells. He had a weak heart. He was 135 pounds even in adulthood. The other brothers were strong. Helio was the runt. He sat in the back of the dojo for years and watched, just watched Carlos teach, watched the movements, watched what worked on bigger men. And one day, when Carlos was late for a class, a student who had paid for a lesson was sitting waiting. Helio, 16 years old, said, quote, 11. The student was skeptical, but agreed. Helio taught him using techniques he had watched but never performed. The student came back the next day and requested Helio specifically. Then the next student requested Helio. Then the next. Carlos, to his credit, saw what was happening. He did not crush his brother. He said, quote, 12. And here is the crucial part. Helio realized that the original Japanese jiu-jitsu, the jiu-jitsu Carlos had learned, was designed for strong men. It used muscle. It used leverage that required a certain level of physical power. Helio did not have that power. So Helio rebuilt the art. He redesigned every technique. He made them work for small, weak men. He invented positions that used the opponent's weight against them. He developed the guard, the closed guard, as we know it today. He created, essentially, modern Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Not Carlos, Helio. The sickly child did it. Then he started challenging people. In the 1930s, Helio walked into boxing rings, wrestling rings, judo tournaments, anywhere he could find a fight. He was 135 pounds. He fought professional heavyweight wrestlers. He fought boxers. He fought judoka from Japan. His most famous fight was against Masahiko Kimura in 1951. Kimura was the greatest judoka in the world. He was the most feared grappler on the planet. He weighed 85 kilos. Helio weighed 63 kilos. They met at Maracana Stadium in Rio de Janeiro in front of 20,000 people. The fight went 13 minutes. Kimura could not finish him. Kimura was stronger. Kimura was a better judoka, and Kimura could not finish him. Finally, Kimura caught Helio in a shoulder lock, the move now called the Kimura lock, named after that exact fight. Helio refused to tap. Helio's arm broke. You can hear the crack in the black and white newsreel footage if you find it. Helio still refused to tap. His brother Carlos, in his corner, finally threw in the towel. Kimura himself, after the fight, said publicly that Helio was the bravest man he had ever fought, and that if the fight had not been stopped, Helio would have let his own arm be torn off before he tapped out. Helio went on fighting until he was in his mid-40s. He had 10 children. He raised them all on the mats. At the age of 90, he was still training. At 92, he was still rolling with black belts on the mats in Rio. He was famously photographed in a gi at 95, still teaching. He died in January 2009 at 95 years old. He was surrounded by children, grandchildren, great successful martial art in the world, and fathered the most dangerous fighting dynasty on the planet. Weakness, handled correctly, is the longest-lasting strength. Now, we come to him, the man I saved for last. The man whose body was so perfect, so fast, so efficient, that his own nervous system killed him at 32. Bruce Lee. You think you know this story. You do not. You have seen the movies. You have seen the yellow tracksuit. You have seen the 1-inch punch. You have heard the nickname ___quote _13____. You have seen the grainy footage of him jumping a 40-inch wall without a running start. You have seen the photo of his back muscles so defined that other bodybuilders thought it was airbrushed. You have seen none of what killed him. He was born Lee Jun-fan on November 27, 1940, in a hospital in San Francisco's Chinatown. His father was a Hong Kong opera singer on tour. His mother was from a wealthy Hong Kong family. He was born in the hour of the dragon, in the year of the dragon. The Chinese believed this was the most powerful birth possible. As an infant, he was cast in an American film because the director needed a Chinese baby. His career started before he could walk. The family moved back to Hong Kong when he was 3 months old. Hong Kong under Japanese occupation. He grew up in a city that had been starved, bombed, and brutalized. His family had money, but the streets did not. He was a street kid. He was a thin, small boy with an attitude. He fought constantly. He got beaten constantly. He lost. He came home with blood on his face. His mother made him promise to learn to defend himself properly. At 13, he walked into the school of a Wing Chun master named Yip Man. And the thing you have to understand about Yip Man is that Yip Man did not want to teach Bruce at first. Bruce was half German on his mother's side, and Yip Man's old students objected to teaching a boy with foreign blood. Yip Man taught him anyway. He saw something in him. Something that was not patience. Something that was hunger. Bruce trained like nobody else. He would hit the wooden dummy thousands of times a day. He would run up the hills of Hong Kong with books in his hands, reading while sprinting. He would challenge older students to rooftop fights. In Hong Kong in the 1950s, rooftop fights were common. No rules, no referee. You went up, you fought, you came down. Or you did not come down. By the time he was 17, the Hong Kong police had a file on him. Multiple street fights. One incident where he allegedly put a rival gang member in the hospital. His parents panicked. They shipped him back to America, to San Francisco, in 1959. He was 18. He had $100 American in his pocket. He was alone. He worked as a dishwasher. He worked as a waiter. He enrolled at the University of Washington in Seattle, where he studied philosophy. He started teaching Wing Chun in his free time. Word spread. A small school, then a bigger school, then a school in Oakland, then Los Angeles. In 1964, he did a demonstration at the International Karate Championships in Long Beach. A Hollywood hairstylist named Jay Sebring saw him. Sebring told a producer named William Dozier. Dozier was casting a show called The Green Hornet. They needed an Asian sidekick named Kato. They tested Bruce. They hired him. And the rest of the story you have heard. The Green Hornet, the martial arts schools across America, the students who included Steve McQueen, James Coburn, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Chuck Norris. The development of his own fighting philosophy, Jeet Kune Do, which was the first system in the world to officially blend kicking, boxing, grappling, and trapping 25 years before MMA existed. He invented mixed martial arts. He just did not live long enough to see it named. He fought the Hollywood system. He demanded leading roles, and they told him America was not ready for an Asian leading man. He went back to Hong Kong in 1971 and made The Big Boss, then Fist of Fury, then Way of the Dragon, which he wrote and directed himself. Each film broke the previous film's box office record in all of Asia. He was the biggest movie star in the Eastern Hemisphere within 18 months. Then came Enter the Dragon, the first ever co-production between Hong Kong and a major American studio, Warner Brothers. Filmed in early 1973, Bruce played the lead. He choreographed the fights. He worked himself to exhaustion on set. Witnesses reported that he was losing weight rapidly during the filming, that he was sweating constantly, even in cool weather, that he was complaining of headaches. On May 10, 1973, while dubbing dialogue for Enter the Dragon at Golden Harvest Studios in Hong Kong, Bruce collapsed. He went into convulsions. He vomited. He lost consciousness. He was rushed to a hospital. He was given a heavy dose of a diuretic called mannitol to reduce swelling in his brain. The doctors were shocked. They had diagnosed cerebral edema. His brain had swollen inside his skull for reasons they could not explain. He recovered. He went home. Warner Brothers was informed. The studio was told it was exhaustion. The truth was that his brain had almost killed him once already, and nobody understood why. 2 months later, on July 20th, 1973, Bruce Lee went to dinner with a Hong Kong actress named Betty Ting Pei at her apartment in Kowloon. They were going to discuss a new film. Around 7 in the evening, Bruce complained of a headache. Betty gave him a painkiller called Equagesic, which contained aspirin and a muscle relaxant called meprobamate. Bruce took it. He lay down in her bedroom to rest before their dinner meeting. He never woke up. When Betty tried to wake him a few hours later, he was unresponsive. She called her friend, the film producer Raymond Chow, who was supposed to meet them for dinner. Chow came over. They could not wake Bruce. They called an ambulance. He was pronounced dead at Queen Elizabeth Hospital at around 11 at night. He was 32 years old. The autopsy was conducted. The official cause of death was cerebral edema. His brain had swollen to 1,375 grams. The Hong Kong coroner ruled it, quote, 1-4. They theorized he had had a hypersensitive reaction to the meprobamate in the painkiller. They theorized that his brain, for reasons never fully explained, could not handle it. That is the public story. Blackwell has read the medical reports, the full ones, the ones the Lee family requested be kept out of the Hong Kong press. There is a detail most people do not know. The autopsy showed that Bruce's adrenal glands were enlarged, significantly enlarged. He had been, by every measure, a man whose body was under constant, extreme stress for years. He had been on a grueling schedule. He had been taking supplements. He had been eating a very specific diet to maintain his on-screen physique. He had been pushing his nervous system past any reasonable limit. The modern theory, proposed in 2018 by medical researchers at the University of Barcelona after reviewing the original autopsy, is that Bruce Lee died of hyponatremia, water intoxication. His kidneys, stressed by the constant exertion, had lost the ability to properly regulate sodium in his body. The painkiller Betty gave him was the final trigger. His brain, already swollen from chronic fluid imbalance, swelled just enough to kill him. Think about what that means. The fastest man who has ever been filmed, the man whose reflexes were so sharp that the cameras of the 1970s could not capture them and had to be slowed down, the man who was physically incapable of being photographed in full speed, was killed by his own body's inability to manage water. He drank himself to death, slowly, over years, without knowing it. His perfection was his poison. The irony is unbearable. Oyama died of cigarettes. Fedor was unmade by his own fame. Gene LeBell, the hardest man in Hollywood, died in a bed. Rickson, undefeated, was broken by his son's needle. Helio, the weakling, outlived everyone. And Bruce, the fastest, the most dangerous, the physical genius whose body was the closest thing to a human weapon the 20th century could produce, died because a painkiller reacted with a brain that had been slowly drowning itself for years. His son Brandon Lee would die 20 years later in 1993 on the set of The Crow, shot by a prop gun that should have been empty. The Lee family line of male heirs ended in 2 separate accidents, 2 decades apart, both involving a single moment of technical failure on a movie set. A cursed symmetry. Bruce Lee is buried in Lakeview Cemetery in Seattle. Brandon is buried next to him. On Bruce's headstone, there is a small, open book with the words, "Your inspiration continues to guide us toward our personal liberation." He was 32 years old. 6 men, 6 bodies that were weapons. Oyama, killed by a cigarette. Fedor, broken by a triangle choke and finally allowed to sleep. Gene LeBell, who went out peacefully at 90 after a lifetime of choking people into puddles. Rickson, undefeated in 400 fights, destroyed by a phone call from New York. Helio, the frail child, who buried every strong brother and lived to see his great-grandchildren. And Bruce, the fastest, the most dangerous, the most perfect, dead in a Hong Kong apartment at 32, killed by a painkiller and a brain that could not hold back its own water. 5 of them were too dangerous for the world. 1 of them was too dangerous for himself. That is the lesson. The body is not a fortress. The body is a bill, and every one of these men paid it. I am Blackwell. The archives never stop. Next time, the executions that broke their own executioners. The NKVD officers who pulled the trigger 10,000 times and then woke up screaming for the rest of their lives. The hangman of the Nuremberg trials who botched the job on purpose. The Soviet executioner who asked for his own bullet at the end. You think the killers walked away clean? You think the hands that pulled the lever ever stopped shaking? Some of them ended in madhouses. Some of them ended in bathtubs with their own pistols. Some of them are still alive in their 90s, drooling in nursing homes in Moscow and St. Petersburg, watched by nurses who do not know whose hands they are wiping clean. Subscribe if your nerves can take it. Hit the bell if you want to know the names of the men who killed for a living and could not live with it. The archives never stop, neither do I.